Hi everyone, welcome to my review of David Zucker's The Naked Gun 2.5, The Smell of Fear from 1991. So yes, back again here, the sequel this time to the original Naked Gun film, and yes, this trilogy of course, requested by the YouTuber Jared Griffiths, so check his channel out of course. Once again, I'll leave a very easy link in the description, so simply a click to that and it will take you to his channel, so check that out if you can. And yes, this trilogy has been requested, also a few other things as well, including the Police Squad TV series, which is of course this trilogy, all based off of as well. So yes, this one I was looking forward to. David Zucker once again directing. He co-directed of course in the first film, but this one he directs, and you also have Jerry Zucker and Jim Abrahams. They were, at times weirdly they are credited, with this film for writing, but actually that is not the case. They don't have actually any involvement in the script of this film. But yes, David Zucker, certainly, is an impressive individual. Big fan here, and yes, he directs this film, and of course, the main cast, pretty much everyone returning in this film, and kind of a few of them actually having bigger roles. But yes, a very quick video here, and non-spoiler reviews, just in case you were wondering. I'm not going to give any spoilers here, and you don't need to kind of go away and watch this before kind of watching this video. But yes, this is the one I had. I was looking forward to. I had kind of high hopes for, and yes, it's a film that I won't really get into the plot, because one, it's it is a kind of once again an all-out comedy. The plot is simply what it's trying to parody, and just basically lending itself into the actual the potential of the gags and stuff. So yes, once again a very kind of Bond-esque kind of plot, in a parody form. It involves solar energy and different doubles being used. For example, Richard Griffiths, the great actor, of course. He was such a great actor, and he is in this film as Meinheimer, and also the double, and that's kind of involved in the kind of villain's plans. And of course, yes, he's actually great in this film, really funny, and it's kind of some really once again this film is very charming, especially the first half, and I think as far as comedy sequels go, quite often they can be pretty bad. Let's face it, there are some good ones, there are some great ones out there. But yes, comedy sequels, pure comedy sequels, often not something that I would expect too much from. But yes, this one surprisingly is actually a very good film in my opinion. Once again, a charming film, very funny, and just to see these characters once again, of course Frank Drebin being the main character here, and just so good. Once again with a few of the other characters, in fact this time around, we do have more of a kind of a larger team up. The first one of course I loved. I think it's a great film. I wouldn't say personally that this one is a great film. I think it's a very good comedy, but it is, it's definitely not. I don't like it as much as the first. But what it does do is kind of put all of these characters together in this one. For example, Nordberg, who's basically was confined, to the hospital, as we know from most of that film. The first one, The Naked Gun. In this film, which I kind of expected. He would kind of team up, with Ed and Frank, and Jane as well, of course, comes back to this film, and basically in between the two films, she had broken up with Frank. So it's basically yes, it's very obvious what's going to happen throughout the film, but yeah, it's kind of very funny as well. I think Priscilla Presley, definitely really good again, and so is Leslie Nielsen. I think certainly. The villains in this film, and stuff involving them I didn't like as much, and I think, for the record, I don't like anything about this film more than the first, other than, just the general idea of these characters being together. However, I think actually, there is something really just amazing about seeing Leslie Nielsen, interact with these characters in the first one, but for the main bulk of the film, he is kind of on his own, you could say, but it doesn't feel like it's, he's not got anyone to kind of bounce off of. There's scenes, of course, where he is with the other characters, but the main kind of, investigations, perhaps, and the main bulk of the film, he is on his own in that sense, but it doesn't feel, it's always great, really, and I think actually that's one of the strengths of the first film is actually just seeing Leslie Nielsen, as the character, perhaps, playing the character Frank Drebin, and of course just you can kind of get the best of both kind of scenarios. In this one, they're all together for most of the film, and I think there was a bit more potential for this one. It could have. I was a bit disappointed with some of the areas it went, in the second half, and I think on paper, to see Nordberg and Ed and everyone together, I was thinking, oh, this could actually, improve some of these characters maybe, or just it could be more enjoyable. But actually, when it came down to it, it's definitely just some of the writing here and some of the scenarios. I think it's just more over the top, in my opinion, and more just not as compared to the first, which is such a great film. So it's hard to compare it, because this is a really, really impressive and highly enjoyable, comedy sequel in its own right. But compared to the first, I just think, it's not as funny. That's for sure for me personally. It's not as outright, hilarious. It's not as effective and kind of, in my opinion, as clever as the first, and it just isn't as investing as the first in its plot. While the first, the plot in the first one was just very, very basic. It wasn't used in a basic way in that sense. It wasn't kind of, moments where it was kind of underwhelming in that sense, because it was about the comedy, yes, and it did have, a plot there, but, even though it was a very basic, simple plot, it was the way the characters were kind of used, and the comedy was played out. I think it was constantly hilarious, especially even the final act. That's something that comedies can kind of very, very easily, kind of go off the rails completely. Even in the final act of what was, up until the final act, maybe a great film, comedy, it can kind of completely go off and go all out kind of insane and not, be as enjoyable. But the first one was just so impressive in that sense. It did not do that. But this one, of course, slightly takes a little bit of a dip, definitely in the second half overall. I think up until that, I would have given it higher marks. But, overall, a very good film. I think there is some more kind of over the top visual moments in this. For example, they dress up and they sing and dance. This kind of thing. It's not as subtle. It's not as kind of investing. It hasn't got as much of a flow that I really liked of the first one. But again, in this film, as I say, I do really, really enjoy this one. It's got the charm. It's got these characters together, which I really liked. A very, very warm film. This, definitely got a heart and some very effective moments. Once again, visual comedy. I think one of the best moments really is the opening kind of sequence. Actually, involving, of course, Leslie Nielsen at the White House. That is, hilarious stuff. And I think, the first half is really, really good. It's just kind of the second half that's definitely, kind of goes a little bit downhill. But that's just for my liking. I think I'd recommend this. If you love the first, I think you could easily love this one as well. And I just don't think it's, it's definitely not on the level for me. And it's not that kind of, because the first one for me is one of the funniest, kind of pure comedy films of all time. Just like Airplane for me. This one, I wouldn't say that, but it is very enjoyable comedy. If you think this is going to be an awful film, think again. At least in my opinion, I think a very, very worthy sequel. I can't be disappointed in any way, because this is a very, very impressive follow-up. Taking the characters of the first, mixing up a little bit and kind of delivering once again, some really, really funny slapstick, good, decent writing, overall, and moments of really, really good writing for me, and just I think just the visual moments once again, this romance once again, not as good as in the first. I think it was kind of very a little bit maybe tiresome a little bit, in this one, the way it was done, because they kind of just once again fell for each other. And just the way it was done, it was a bit. It could have been better, I think, and it didn't even have to happen at all. Them breaking up and stuff. But yes, Ed once again, Nordberg. Maybe again Nordberg. I expected a bit more from that character, just because of how I think really hilarious he was in the first, and I thought, seeing him, actually on the field and with these, characters together, it would have been a bit more funny than it actually was. There was a moment, the skateboard, of course, early on in the film, which is hilarious. But other than that, I think maybe just not enough given to certain characters. Actually, there is, just kind of a quality in the writing department. But yes, very very good film. I think, as I say, it does take a dip in the second half, but overall, and certainly the first half, very very good film, very charming. Just to see Leslie Nielsen again, just being amazing, is a treat. And of course, just the way it's directed is definitely decent. Some solid direction here, and of course the writing once again. It's never to a point where it's unimpressive writing. It really is enjoyable. Mostly throughout, and I think Richard Griffiths, is a great actor that he was. Just really really enjoyable here. A great addition, and this scene, of course, with I'm not going to ruin it, but it kind of involves hostages and stuff. Maybe a bit further on in the film, that was one of my favourite moments actually, and I just think the film throughout, even though the second half isn't as good in my opinion, I think it is enjoyable, it is charming, and it is a funny film. So yes, overall I give this film an 81%. Very very good film, really really enjoyable comedy once again, and very very worthy. Just a sequel to the first. It kind of takes these characters and it doesn't ruin these characters. No, like some comedies go, very very often that is the case. The characters are completely different to kind of an original comedy, and they're just kind of used in just disappointing ways, and it's just, yes, I think this film, for all things considered, is a very very good, and I imagine surprising. If I didn't know the kind of the praise that this film has got, it'd be a surprising film actually. And yes, I think in the writing department, in the direction, the editing, once again, very very solid. Not as good as the first. I think Leslie Nielsen, and Priscilla Presley are definitely the standouts here in the performances. I think a few of the other, also Richard Griffiths, but yeah, some of the other characters aren't quite as, kind of stand out in this film. They're not as kind of enjoyable, even though they are kind of all together in this one and all kind of, along for the ride in that sense. They're more kind of banding together as a group, but it isn't quite as enjoyable as what I thought it would have been in that sense. But yes, while I don't think it's anywhere, kind of close to the first, I do think it's a very, very worthy sequel, and yes, just a very enjoyable, charming, innocent, kind of just fantasy kind of based comedy. Once again, it's a kind of it's an escapist film, and it just kind of makes me it makes me feel happy. It's a very innocent, charming, as I say, kind of simple comedy. Once again, with very, very solid writing. And definitely, I preferred the first half to this. I think it was at times hilarious, but the first half, yes, it is better, but the second half isn't bad. It's just simply, not as strong, not as investing, and not as funny, not as kind of enjoyable. The locations as well in this one, I think not as enjoyable as the first, but yes, definitely a very very good comedy sequel, and a very good film in my opinion. So there we have it. Next up, of course, is the final film in the Naked Gun trilogy, and I'll probably be reviewing that. Quite busy this week, possibly this week, who knows, maybe not, maybe the following week, but yes, I look forward to that. And yes, once again, a very good film from this time David Zucker, and yes, all involved, definitely very impressive. So yes, as always, thanks for watching my review.